Hi, classmates and Ira. My name is Aislinn. I am going to be discussing my paper titled How Can the Entangled Rhetoric of Indignity Be Used to Transcend That Dichotomy in American Society? So, this is a paper that I wrote for the Rhetorical Society of America, the 2026 conference, and the theme is rhetorical indignities, and it's interested in questions related to is dignity and indignity entangled? What can be done about this entangled dichotomy? What is its impact, and like what's the relationship between it and the study of rhetoric? And so, what comes to mind when I think about indignity in America, of many things to think about, is the incredible wealth gap. So, this is one of the wealthiest eras of American history, as well as an era that's unprecedented in terms of wealth inequality. Wealth has been growing faster than output and twice as fast as income. The rich poor dichotomy I'm suggesting is one of indignity, because the wealthy enjoy unimaginable luxuries while those at the bottom essentially struggle to make to make ends meet and to get their basic needs met, especially related to food access, safe shelter, and healthcare. So, in most realms, lying, cheating, and stealing are considered undignified means of getting ahead. But for some reason in the economy, these are seen as dignified behaviors insofar as it's done by families that have created and maintained wealth for over a century. Perhaps even more incredible is that the slow theft of labor and capital from the working class is normalized. So people aren't pillaging the mansions and factories of the elite in the way that it was happening during the Reign of Terror in France. And so I'm going to use Burkean language to discuss the symbol systems that have created and maintained this system, and also ways that our relationship, our rhetorical relationship with these symbols, can maybe inspire a sense of indignancy. So that's like an acting out of what is a righteous anger about inequality. And so I'm interested in what can be done to wrest power from the American elite and this dichotomy of indignity that keeps them wealthy. I'm going to start by clarifying that the working class is not to blame for the normalization of wealth inequality. I'm proposing that working class individuals are the unwitting victims of a centuries long heist. Wealth inequality has been maintained by elites hijacking the modern American symbolic frame and the symbols that I understand as cogs within it. Um, Burke wrote that it's native to human beings to create frameworks or schemas of meaning to navigate reality because we're essentially receiving a fire hose of sensory data at any given time. And so the symbols within these frames give us reference points that indicate continued operation of the larger frame of meaning. But something that happens, and I think this has been purposefully done by elites, is people can scarcely keep up with calibrating their symbols within larger frames. And this is where the rich have essentially um, taken advantage of that vulnerability, because they know that the working class has to adopt aspects of a larger mainstream social frame for the sake of efficiency and or necessity. And what they're doing, as Burt describes, is they mediate the collective frame of meaning and success. An example is the currency of modern American life. So the greenback dollar, which is sometimes a piece of paper and sometimes just a digital numeral, it is one of the symbols that help normalize wealth inequality. It in itself is not actually, it doesn't actually mean anything. So fiat money essentially represents, in a twice removed shorthand, that which used to be physical, tangible objects like gold or silver pieces, or actual resources of sustenance like food and water. And so the greenback American dollar is a symbol for economic participation. And when acquired in enough volume, as in the case with the rich, it's like a symbol for success within the larger American frame for happiness, which creates this indignity of the rich having the sense of dignity because they're successful and they're happy, while those who are wealth excluded are seen as like undignified. Um, Again, like this is, we have to use symbols as a necessary shorthand for navigating everyday life. Burke himself writes, I hope this passage can serve at least somewhat to suggest how fantastically much of our reality could not exist for us were it not for a profound and inveterate involvement in symbol systems. Our presence in a room is immediate, but the room's relation to our country as a nation, and beyond that to international relations and cosmic relations, dissolves into a web of ideas and images that reach through our senses only insofar as the symbol systems that report on them are heard or seen. That's on page 48. So American politicians are often bought out by the elites, if not elites themselves, and they essentially function as mediators or spellbinders. So they use symbols as the strings with which they induce action in the working class. Here's this pop culture product that will make you feel beautiful and successful and happy like all of these rich people. So work away your life so that you can acquire this object. And this is how they kind of distract the working class from looking at the real dichotomy of inequality by focusing attention on these symbols that ultimately don't mean anything, and it's within a larger frame that's not working for the best interest of the working class. So that's how they induce action in the working class, through their symbolic mediation. And they mediate symbols to obfuscate the gulf between them and the working class. The gulf between the rich and the wealth excluded must be obfuscated. Um, so the working class are led to identify with elites, often against their best interests. And Burke himself warned about the dangers in this. In identification lies the source of dedications and enslavements. That's in Motives in the foreword. Um, and so the American elites orchestrate a frame in which the working class will spend most of their waking hours contributing labor in order to meet their basic needs. They have to make concessions in order to make peace with such an arrangement of their life. And through consubstantiation, they come to identify with that to which they dedicate their waking hours. And the rich take advantage of this. The powers that be use the vulnerability of consubstantiation to their advantage. So consider the politician who says to an audience of farmers, I was a farm boy myself, to secure their vote, when in reality, he's going to be directing their taxpayer funding towards making the rich more rich. And so I'm proposing that to address the indignity of the wealth inequality, the working class must recognize the distorted symbols that construct their frames of meaning so that the working class identity can be differentiated from that of elites. And so now I'm going to talk about how that differentiation can happen. And I'm going to be talking about transgressive rhetoric, but transgressive rhetoric um, not that inspires apathy within the working class, which is what I think the current system of wealth inequality creates right now, as people feel resigned that they can never get out from under the oppressive thumb of capitalism. But I'm wondering if there's a way that we can mediate the relationship that people have with symbol systems in order to inspire some indignancy, which is like an action. And I'm going to be talking about Tibetan Buddhism. Seems kind of random, but bear with me. The main aim for Tibetan Buddhism is for practitioners to espouse renunciation and attachment to like the physical objects of this world, and with the popular reality that maybe limits their perception of the world. And what is used to help students do this is symbols. So there's an incredible amount of symbolic images, ritual gestures, and magic formulas that help a student transcend the self and reject the status quo. The status quo being the social frame that is composed usually by the powers that be or the prevailing regime. In Tibetan Buddhism, these are lamas who manifest the path for students, and they mediate the student's relationship with complex practice material. I'm proposing that rhetoricians can essentially function within the rhetoric of the American economy in the same way that lamas do within Tibetan Buddhism. And in the same way that politicians do right now, I'm proposing that maybe rhetoricians can step in and be correcting the mediation of politicians. And what's really interesting about Tibetan Buddhism is a lot of the symbolic rhetoric is actually violent. Um, this includes wrathful compassion from lamas towards their students, as well as extensive visualizations about sometimes being dismembered and fed to a deity. And the idea is not to endorse violence or to encourage practitioners to go out and commit violence, but it's instead to kill the ego, specifically the ego that is attached to um, the status quo, the main and prevailing societal frame. So it's trying to loosen that relationship between the symbol systems that the students have been using in their lives up until starting the practice. So interestingly, these llamas are using symbols of indignity to foster dignity because ultimately the students, they can create within themselves a pristine mode of cognition, free of defilements and negative propensities. And this is similar to what Burke wanted for his readers and his students to reject the status quo. And in Burke's case, which is pretty similar to Tibetan Buddhism, he used killing and slaying as a metaphor. And that's in Motives that he writes about that. And that's what gave me the first idea for this paper, is thinking about Burke's writing about killing and slaying, which I understand to be killing and slaying of one's historic relationship with symbols, but also the ego that is attached to popular reality and the frame that it has been born into. Again, not to encourage violence. Burke wanted his readers to understand the rhetorical machinery of American realpolitik and how individuals are consubstantiated into identifying with its symbolic frame. The something to which Burke refers to when he writes the killing of something is the changing of it is both the life of the symbols as well as the identities formed through identification with American realpolitik. So what's interesting is both in the case of llamas and with Burke, they are encouraging their respective students to think about death or indignity to help them become more alive, which is pretty interesting. So how does this relate specifically to wealth inequality in America? So I'm proposing that if established teachers can use paradoxical rhetorical strategies to help their students transcend the objects of their dissonance, can indignity help the undignified American address or even transcend wealth inequality? And I'm thinking about the working class colloquialism, eat the rich. I am not here to encourage cannibalism. Instead, let me remind you of this cheeky little statement from Burke and his motives is for the so-called desire to kill a certain person is much more properly analyzable as a desire to transform the principle which that person represents. In the case of the rich, it means exploitative hoarding, um, that is unfair to the community, their workers. So it's not the rich that the working class seek to consume, but their riches, so that the ample resources of this nation are used to meet the basic needs of all before they indulge in the fantasies of a few. Tibetan Buddhist lamas foster a pristine mode of cognition within their students, not by avoiding transgressive rhetoric and violent imagery about the more horrible aspects of humanity and existence, but by focusing on it and using it to their advantage. So I'm proposing that maybe similarly, by a focus on the symbols of inequality within the American economy and larger kind of like social norms, a student can come to recognize like the relativity of it and the absurdity of some of it. So in the case of, say, an employer has a $10,000 watch and a worker notices it and is encouraged and uses their knowledge of rhetorical, like symbolic tools to think about, that doesn't really make any sense because I'm struggling to meet my basic needs. I'm struggling to pay rent, living paycheck to paycheck. At the same time, my boss is wearing a $10,000 watch. That symbol of success that they're wearing, that invites compliments from colleagues and coworkers, and basically communicates respectability, is kind of paradoxical. So maybe we can focus on those paradoxical symbols of success within the American rhetorical frame to actually like inspire some like awakening or transcendence that maybe parallels or mirrors that which can happen in Tibetan Buddhism. So ultimately, maybe the dichotomy of indignity can be used to inspire indignancy, such that the American proletariat can transcend the binary altogether. So rather than continuing to participate in the ossification machine that is the formalization of American capitalist symbology, maybe scholars of rhetoric can instead direct working class attention toward the symbols that normalize wealth inequality. Because the current symbolic frame creates an emotional apathy, a resigned complacency among the working class, which ultimately allows the system to continue functioning as it has. And so maybe a different rhetorical approach in academia and popular culture could help inspire indignancy, a state in which an individual feels and shows and acts on anger about injustice. Specifically, rhetorical scholars can focus on like the ridiculousness of certain symbols of success, um, living in enormous mansions is absurd when there's like a trailer park down the street where people sometimes have the power cut off. And so, in this way, I'm proposing that we can actually use the dichotomy of indignity within American society to transcend the real indignity of American wealth inequality. And thanks. I look forward to interaction about this idea.